recording now. You'll notice that it says July webinar there, 2021, so I'll click straight past that. But firstly, we're going to introduce yourself, Mike. So welcome aboard. But before I introduce you, over 3,400 winners, which is incredible, 133 Group 1 victories, 148 Group 2 victories, 98 Group 3 victories, and the champion trainer 8 times in your homeland, and a group winner in 6 different countries. So I think sometimes we forget, with all the banter when we're walking around the sales with you, just how incredible your record is. But have you left any group races for anyone else?
Yeah, there's plenty out there, don't worry. There's plenty.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And as you can see on the screen there, the most important part of our webinar tonight is to talk about the Durban July. So for those that don't know, I did my own research on Matthew. Matthew made me do some today, but it's been going since 1897. It's over 2,200 metres, but started out as a mile race. And traditionally, it's basically the South African equivalent to the Melbourne Cup in terms of popularity. And, you know, somewhere between a Cox Plate and a Melbourne Cup. Would that be fair to say, Mike?
Yeah, pretty much. Because it's a handicap, I suppose one can compare it to your Melbourne Cup, albeit not a 2-mile race, but in terms of status, yes.
Yeah. And you won it this year, so we'll touch on Sparkling Water, but I might go to Matthew. Matt, obviously watching from back here, how impressive was that win? I know that I stayed up to watch it, and Mike had 4 really good runners in the race, but Sparkling Water really put them to the sword.
Yeah, Corey, she was very impressive, and it was a great training feat because she hadn't run for about 6 or 7 weeks, I think, and this was on purpose because obviously it being a handicap, my dad was trying to protect her rating and make sure she came into the race with the lowest weight. And so she came into the race very well handicapped and fit and ready. And Samanga Kamala, the jockey, rode a fantastic race. And for my dad to win the race, for Mary Slack, the owner, was extra special as well because her family is steeped in racing tradition. And this is the first time that she's ever won this race.
Yeah, and Robbie, I mean, obviously with how awesome and some of your best runners have been in handicaps, you must have admired from afar as well at what a training performance it was.
Oh, it was outstanding, Corey. We were actually talking in the morning, you know, just how well weighted she was and how much of a feat it would be if she won. And she absolutely blew them away. So it was an unbelievable feat from Mike to set it all up. You know, you hope that it all sets up well, but to pull it off is another thing. So it was a great training feat, no doubt about that. Actually, all 4 runners were fantastic. They all ran super. They all ran brilliantly.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm not sure if you know this stat, but the jockey Samanga, when he's on your horses, he goes at 22.3%. So it's not a bad.
Yeah, he's a good jockey, Samanga, and I mean, obviously. They're fairly selective about what they ride. He's got an agent that's quite astute, and they try and cherry pick. So I'm not surprised it's a high stat with him.
Yeah, and we've got some really good guests on watching tonight. So guys, throw out as many questions as you can just in the Q&A button as per normal. What I'm planning on doing is going through a little bit, but we want to try and open the floor up so you guys can ask as many questions as you can of Mike while we've got him on. Obviously, he's Matthew's father, and Matt speaks to him on a regular occasions, but it's not every day that you get a chance to speak to Mike in this type of forum. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump on. But this race in particular, Matthew, you were telling me earlier that it's actually got a fair bit of tradition for your family, and your father's won it 5 times, but also you've had other family members as well be winning trainers in this race.
Yeah, not winning trainers, but my grandfather won the race as a jockey. I think it was in the 1960s. He won it twice. So it probably may never be a race that I could win because I've now taken out a license in South Africa. But it's one of those races when you grow up in the industry in South Africa that you dream about winning. So to have my grandfather win it twice and my dad win it 5 times now, and I'm fortunate enough to be a part of it on 2 occasions with Igugu and Bold Savannah. So those were special memories for me.
And Mike, you've won it 5 times. So we'll just go through that list. In 2002, Ipitombe, if I've pronounced that correctly. Grey
Yes.
Inn in 2004. Bold Savannah in 2010. And in 2011, Igugu, who we now have the son of Igugu in the stable. And also, so that's 11 years since your last win in the race. So pretty incredible to go for the 5th. So fast approaching the record.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we used to export most of our best horses. If I'd kept Soft Falling Rains and Vercingetorix and the likes of those kind of horses back here, they would have had big chance of winning that race as well. So the priority shifted a little bit to export over the years. And, preferred racing for dollars than rands, to be quite frank. So, it was nice to be in the race again with a chance. It's been a good few years since that actually happened.
Yeah, you had several chances. So did you feel Sparkling Water was the one to win before the race, or you thought your chances? I did hear you speak quite fondly of her leading up to it, but you had 4 really good chances.
Yeah, at handicapping wise, she was the right one. It was going to be very hard. The debate was always the 3-year-olds, were they good enough in terms of the last crop and this crop. But for a 3-year-old to give her £3 that time of the year was going to be very difficult, if everything went right and went her way.
Yeah,
but I think the handicapping is really what did it for her.
And I've got the first live question from the audience. It's from Steve Davis. He asked how good the lunch was the day before the July.
Yeah, something, Steve. Yeah, we peaked early, the team. Thank God she peaked on the day, but we definitely peaked 24 hours too early.
That's good to hear. And as we talked about with Matthew before, about family connections, in your winners, there's a lot of family connections in this race as well. So you speak about Mary Slack there. I believe it was her family also involved in Grey Inn. Is that correct?
Yes, her parents were involved in Grey Inn. They bred him as well. In fact, he was by Zabil, if I remember correctly, out of a Christmas tree mare that they bought in Australia. So in fact, he was actually an Aussie horse. And he went on to win in Dubai. He got just beaten in Singapore as well in the 10 furlong there, the QE2 Cup. I think by Vengeance of Rain, he was also Zabil. He came down to Australia, ran, I think in the Olymbe run 4th. We ran him in the Melbourne Cup, but it was by then he was on the way out.
Yeah, and obviously Igugu and Bold Savannah from the Sheikh Hamdan. So a good link there. And Matthew, I might pass this to you. Obviously touching on Igugu, who we can see up there on the top left. We now have El Misk in the stable, so the son of Igugu, who trialled very well this morning and made a nice race debut in a 1700 metre, but has a bright spring maybe ahead of him.
Yeah, well, Igugu was also Australian born by Galilea, and as many of you know, she was probably one of the best fillies ever to race in South Africa. And once she had completed her racing career, she was shipped overseas. She raced a couple of times in Dubai, but never really produced her best form there. And then she obviously went to stud, and 6 years later, we managed to come across El Misk, who's Dan Silly out of Igugu, and obviously she was so special to my family, and we felt that El Misk still has a lot of racing potential, and we thought we'd have a crack at him. And you're right, he made a nice race debut, and he trialled fantastic this morning, so he's come on very much with the run. So hopefully he can improve some more and show us a bit of that Igugu spark over the spring.
Yeah. And Robbie, you're an ex-jockey. This question might be good for yourself. Harry Williams was just saying, looking at the riding position of the jockey here in South Africa, it seems to be quite an unusual seat comparatively to Australian jockeys. But you've obviously seen a lot of jockeys worldwide, and an ex-jockey yourself. What are your thoughts on what you've seen of the differences in riding?
Well, I know. I think that a lot of the riding styles becoming universal, really. I mean, a lot of the South African jockeys have been very successful in our country and in Hong Kong. And so I don't sort of necessarily agree with that. I think the riding styles are becoming very similar worldwide now. Glenn Schofield and a lot of the guys have come over here. So, so I think that's just... they're sitting low to the saddle and just got his knees out a little bit. But you see Brett Preble do a lot of that here as well. So I think it's just a slight, everyone's got their slight variance in how they do things, but it's just a little tweaks, that's all. It's obviously effective. If he's hitting at 22%, maybe we should do it more often there.
Only on Mike's horses, he's at 22%.
Oh, okay.
So he has a significantly higher ratio on Mike's horses. So it's a pretty impressive strike rate. And actually, Mike, we might touch on you. One of the riders actually on one of your horses in the big race was Callum Murray, who's obviously here in Australia now and does a bit of work with us. Would have been good to catch up with Cal while he was back over there.
Yeah, he was he didn't come over specifically to ride Al Mutana. I think he was coming over to introduce his new filly to his parents and all his mates, Parade. He's quite chuffed with himself, but he's a hard-working young man, and he seems to be adapting to the Australian sort of racing style, pace, the tracks, all that kind of thing. He's getting, he's got a brain on him, and he's got a good work ethic. So he's always going to have a chance wherever he goes, and he's very ambitious, and he's all loved up now as well. So all goes well for him for the future.
And obviously, Al Mutana won very recently as well in a Group 1. Mike, you might want to, if you could touch on Al Mutana and the pedigree there, being a deep field, another Australian pedigree.
Yeah, deep field out of a Reduce mare, Sheikh Hamdan bred. And basically the last horse in training in South Africa. They've still got mares and obviously some quite decent stallions, including Rafif, who is a Reduce choice out of a South African mare that we bought. We bought him at Easter, and he's turning out to be a sort of top 2 stallion here in South Africa, getting horses to go 5 furlongs and a mile and a half. So he's pretty well related, Al Mutana, and as I say, an import from Australia.
Yeah, and since we last spoke to you, the protocols look like they may change as well. Is that correct for those people watching?
I don't know anymore, to be honest with you.
So still
it's been quite disheartening for us, to be honest. But we hope to be inspected in October by the EU, and we can get that protocol going, because I think there's some pretty good business to be done between yourselves and us. At 12 to 1 the dollar, we've got some smart female lines here that will appeal to breeders there. It's new blood, and the price is right. So there's some good business to be done. It's something Matthew and I had spoke about many years ago that we wanted to get going, but obviously been held back by the protocols. But if we can get that to happen, get that to change, there's a lot we can do between the two. You could come here. I think your average there is about $350,000 maybe at the sales, whereas you'd come here for $50,000 and you're going to be buying at the top end. It's a big difference. Yes, the horses will take a long time to get there, but you can pre-train them on the way, and you're not going to try and buy a Blue Diamond or a Slipper winner here. You're going to come and buy a miler plus classic type horse. So I think there's big things to be done between the two countries. You know, we've seen the value of importing your bloodstock. It's gone well here. It's certainly enhanced ours, and I believe, you know, those female lines that have been upgraded and sire lines. I mean, a son of Rafif, why wouldn't you come and buy a son or a daughter of Rafif? Yeah, you know, he's a son of Reduke's Choice. It would be a very appealing, and it'd be, you know, pedigrees you recognize in Australia. So hopefully we can get that done, because there's some good business to be done.
Yeah, and I guess with that, also with racing as well. So, for example, if you wanted to bring horses across for things like the Melbourne Cup or our big races, is that a bit of a hindrance still with the protocols as well? It almost makes it impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible to raid in from here. You'd have to go via Europe for 6 months. So, yeah, that would be very difficult. You'd have to take a hell of a long-term view on that, to be honest. So, yeah, at this stage of the game, direct between Australia and South Africa isn't on the table for some reason. I don't think anyone's ever bothered to get that protocol going. It's just purely because of that. It's always going to be via Europe, or via the EU, or via the UK. So it's a long process. But I see the Aussie trainers and owners are shopping abroad. I mean, they realize the value in bloodstock from other countries, especially for your classic type racing. So, and you've got a very healthy economy, so you can afford to pay. And right, yeah, you know, for a couple $100,000, you're buying the absolute best. Whereas in England, you know, you're paying big money. I'm not saying horses are as good as them, but you can cherry pick. There certainly is value to be had in South Africa if you have got boots on the ground, got an idea of what you require.
Yeah. And Matt, I was looking through the list of winners of the Durban July, and another name that's part of the team popped up in 2016, Joey Ramsden with a horse called the Conglomerate. So it sort of has a bit of Griffiths to Cock written over it, the Durban July.
Yeah, well, Joey is a fantastic trainer in his own right, and he picked the Conglomerate in Australia as well by Lonhro. So we like to call Joey the Lonhro expert. And he's also won a fantastic race that year. I think it was John Barrier 20 out of 20. And won an awesome race. And Joey's not short of his own success with top horses like Variety Club. So his name is definitely up there with some of the best trainers in South Africa.
Yeah, and Robbie, it's been a good couple of weeks for us at the stable with three nice winners, including Hard Squeeze in the city race. But I guess we are in a transition, and from your lofty standards over the years, it's probably, you know, below where we want to be, but we're getting there quickly. But I had a look today, and I'll get you to touch on those winners in a second, but I had a look today. We're actually still running at a 35% place ratio, and top five, we finished top five in 75% of our races, which is pretty incredible when we've had what we would consider a bit of a barren spell with that. So I'll let you touch on the winners.
Yeah, well, Miss Lottie's a really nice horse. It's one of our purchases there from the youth, and Hard Squeeze was very dominant the way she won at Sandown, and the way she bolted in there. You would think that she could easily do that again next start. So considering we always expected to have a lull after our once we announced the partnership, there wasn't a lot to follow because. It was pretty well documented that after the brain surgery, we didn't have a lot of young horses to follow. So all of those horses that won have sort of gone off to the breeding barn or retired. So our great old horses, Halvorsen and King Magnus, are there, but they're carnival horses that go absent this time of the year. So they're in getting fit. So our young horses we're really happy about, but like all young horses, Mother Nature determines when they're going to be ready to race. So some of them are starting to kick off now. And we've seen, those three nice horses trial this morning. And let's be frank, was fantastic on debut the other day. And some of the young horses like Yaki Ishii are not far from returning. And so Matt can sort of run through some of those. But they're quite exciting, Matt, aren't they, the way they've been training?
Very exciting, Robbie, and I'm hoping we're going to have a fantastic spring as well. We've got the 5 international horses, and a few of them are looking like they're really smart too. So it looks like we're gearing up for a good couple of months.
Yeah. And Robbie, I guess it's probably, I mean, you do get put in a box a little bit in Australian racing. So I know that some of the English trainers tend to be, okay, they must only be able to stay, train stayers, or Robbie, you won the Group 1 with the quarterback, so you train sprinters. But it's been fantastic over these last few months to see some of these young horses that are coming out over a complete variety of distances and a variety of pedigrees.
Yeah, I suppose when you bounce out with Alexandra over 3,000 metres or hard squeezing horses like that, they think, where'd that come from? But yeah, we are going to have, the future set up for a variety of distances. And one of the whole ideas of, since the new partnership has been formed, is we've also purchased a variety of sires from all different sire lines to give us a vast array of distances to run over. There's some nice So You Thinks that'll get over a trip. There's Done Deals, there's sprinting breeds, and so there's Zoo Stars and all sorts of pedigrees amongst them there. So once all those young horses mature, they'll find their own spots in amongst the sprinting distance, the middle distances, the classic distances. So reiterating the same story again, the same theme is that once those young horses mature, there's a lot of quality there that will find their own. They'll align themselves into where they sit. And what we're seeing in training that Matt and I are seeing, and that gives us the excitement to get up every day and head to the stables, is really good. So it's just a matter of waiting for them to mature.
And Mike, I guess you've been watching from afar, I'm sure. You don't miss too much. I got a phone call from you at 7 p.m. the other night just to check something. So I'm sure that you've been watching, but you must be pleased to have seen the Drakenstein stud colours run around last week and come home for that beautiful second on debut for Let's Give Frank Baby, the Frankel filly.
Yeah, for sure. When the partnership first started, I said to Matthew that we should be looking to get some classic horses, with myself and our clients like Drakenstein, Gaynor Rupert, Larry Nestat, and Gary Barber, I think are shareholders in that, and try and get classic horses, because it's going to be very tough to win the Blue Diamond and the Slipper with the establishments there. It's very expensive to buy those horses, and everyone's chasing them, So we took a long-term view. That's why there wouldn't be that many 2-year-old winners, because most of them are really bred along classic lines. We sent out 3 Arrogates from America that Larry Nestat's arranged the purchase of. 2 of them are in training with you, and I think we're quite excited about them. One's a younger colt. There wouldn't be too many Arrogates in Australia, I don't think. And, we've just taken a more of a broader, longer-term view. This year, when we were across, we went a little more for some quicker horses, just purely because we've got, the classic horses that will keep them going anyway in the 3-year-old season, and then hopefully have a couple of early 2-year-old runners. But it's something that's going to take a bit of time, especially when you're deviating from the norm there, and everyone's trying to buy the Slipper winner when you're buying Frankels and you've got Arrogates, and you've got horses that quite frankly want a trip in time to come. So there's got to be that added bit of patience. But fortunately, we brought a good clientele from South Africa, in fact from all over the world, to the stable. We've all got that view. We've taken a view, for at least 3 years, and we'll see what happens from there. But quite now, I think we're on the sort of brink of things starting to happen. Given that those 2-year-olds will now be rising 3, the distance races will be coming up, and hopefully certainty from the perspective of the South African clients that have got involved in the stable, that they'll start to fire, that hopefully find a nice classic horse amongst them all.
Yeah, and Matt, it's been good over the last few weeks. Some of those horses with some of these new clients have actually hit the track. So, you know, they have been incredibly patient, whether it's the South African clients or some of our local clients that have come back on board, or some of Robbie's clients that have come back and invested heavily. You know, everyone has to be really patient in racing, but it's been great to see some of those horses give rewards for the patience.
Yeah, exactly, Corey. Time is free and nobody wants it. So if we can just give the horses the time that they need, they're going to reward us, because we've put a lot of time and effort into purchasing them and educating them. And they're in a good place now that they're good enough, they're going to deliver. And from what we've seen, we're confident that they are good enough, and we're really excited to see them on the track.
Yeah, and Robbie, what different, I guess, locally, you've seen it over 30 years, how horses, you know, come to hand at different times, but we've had a lot of horses come in who have run in preps. And I know from being at the stable that yourself and Matthew know that they're probably not going to have any success in that early prep, because it's a stepping stone to the future. And that's a slightly different way to train that we do it in Australia than elsewhere, where they might go straight up to 2,000 metres. But those horses that get over a trip here, there isn't a lot of races for them in their 2-year-old season, even if they are ready, is there? Unless they run at those shorter distances.
No, well, they don't cater for them here for two reasons. One of the main reasons is they've never been supported. So when they put on a lot of the early races over a bit of a distance, they've had minimal horses contest them. So to put up large prize money and get minimal fields and minimal wagering that funds those races doesn't make financial sense to the people putting on the races, for the governing bodies. So they just stop putting them on. So they basically put them on in the back end. You see a couple of them now. You see the 1800 on Saturday. So they want reasonable size fields for wagering purposes, so that they can, you know, sustain the idea of putting them on. And that's just how Australian racing has always been structured, certainly at this time of the year. So it's only leading into the spring that they start to stretch them, leading into the classics, you know. So that's just how it's been. I can't see that changing. So therefore, the horses that have needed that distance have just been in and out of training until they're mature enough to stretch to that distance, and the races are you know, the programs cater for them.
Yeah, and one last thing, Robbie, I don't know if yourself and Matthew know this, but I looked it up today. Those 3 wins last week, actually, so we speak a lot about the fact that we're going to probably dip down this year to then peak next year, but we've actually just jumped back into the top 20. So even with the fact that we're being patient, the two of you are still in the top 20, which is pretty incredible.
Well, that's good. We didn't expect it, because we didn't sort of have much following, but that's pleasing, because most of the MO is waiting to mature. So that's good news, Corey.
We're actually equal with a couple that are outside of it, but we have about 500 seconds and thirds.
There you go.
And Mike, we might go now to the sales here. So sales season in Australia. So there's a few specimens there you would have laid eyes on yourself, because you're actually here for the sales season. So how did you find, I guess, you've been before, but how did you find the strength of the market now comparatively to previous trips?
Yeah, well, it's just getting stronger and stronger, Corey, because I think your industry is getting so much stronger. And, you know, probably every major player in the world is playing in Australia now. If I just look at the clients we brought into the stable, are all the upper echelon of South African racing in the likes of Mary Slack, Gaynor Rupert, Larry Nestat, Lindsay Ralphs, Lawrence Werners, Arun and Warren. These are guys that are all right at the top end here and are keen to participate in your market. It says something for it, and, you know, prepared to spend there. So, I mean, it's a very strong market. It's a tough market to buy in. I mean, if I look at when I was there in Easter, funny enough, there was a race meeting a week later where I think about 3 So You Think's won Group 1s. But there was $11 or $12 million on offer that day. And I think the minimum trip was a mile. I think I stand to be corrected. Robbie, you know better.
Yeah.
So classic horses have got a place in Australian racing for sure. I mean, all you guys are going to Europe now and buying classic horses. So why shouldn't you be able to breed them there? You know, so, but it just takes patience. It's education of the owner. You know, as Matthew says, giving horses time is for free. Okay, you've got to pay the keep. But I mean, time itself, you know, is something that is freely available. You're going in and you're pushing a young classic horse. You just open yourself up for injury and you finish up hurting him. But I like the way they do them, and they bring them in, they give them a prep, put them out, stimulate them, bring them back in, get them going, get the stimulation, get the growth going, get them back out again. I like that way of doing things. You bring them on slowly and properly. And if you are patient, it seems in Australia, you can be well rewarded. I mean, there's just one day when there's $11 million on offer for a mile and plus races. I can't remember where it was. It could have been
Randwick,
Sydney or was
Sydney.
it Randwick? Yeah.
Yep.
With 3 So You Think's one on the day. And then, you know, you battle sell them at the sales. I mean, does it make sense? But he's a sire that can get you a Group 1 horse. But again, what does it take? Patience, you know. It's an extra year's keep. But when you're racing for $11 million on the day, I'm prepared to wait all day.
Yeah, and Matt, I guess it's an interest. You've mentioned it on webinars before, but all of our big races are for stayers, apart from obviously the Everest and Blue Diamond and those early races. But once you get past those early races, big ones really are, you know, the Melbourne Cup, the Cox Plate that are over a trip. And for a lot of the times, just say it takes 2 years to train a horse and it's an extra $100,000. You're buying that's $100,000, but the price difference when you're buying them can be millions if you want early ones.
Yeah, and I mean, like my dad's been reiterating his patience, because you look at horses like Very Elegant, Winx, you know, they weren't good 2-year-olds, but they were given time and patience, and look how well richly they were rewarded. Even Nature Strip, although he's a short distance horse, he's 7 years old and he's on top of the world, you know. So even if they're sprinters, if you've got patience, you're going to be richly rewarded.
Yep. And Mike, when we went to the sales this year, we did look for both, because we feel like we've got a lot of nice horses to get over ground now, but we thought we better get a few sprinters. And this guy up here on the left, the Lean Mean Machine, I know that you really liked him at the sales.
Yeah, it's a very good looking specimen. I don't know if he's on the screen now. Yes, you know, just I think he's a first season sire, isn't he?
Yeah, from Blue Gum.
That's always the question mark. You know, you could be very shrewd and get in early, because you may not be able to buy them next season if they fire. He certainly looks like an athletic individual. He looks like a runner, put it that way.
Yeah, and
he's got everything it takes. If he was by Reduce's Choice, probably would have cost you $750 or $1 million, or not Reduce. I don't know what's your top side there now. Sort of like Zoo Star.
Well, he's a son of Lean Mean Machine's a son of Zoo Star. Yeah.
Right. So there you go.
If he was a Zoo Star, he probably cost $1 million plus. Also on the screen there, Mike, we've got I think the ones there on the left, you saw all of those. The Star Spangled Banner filly is in the middle, and then down the bottom is the Epaulet colt, both from Inglis Premier as well.
Look, I'm a massive Star Spangled Banner fan. I think Henry's bringing in a horse that Aidan O'Brien, or not Aidan, Joseph won the Cox Plate. It's going to stand there.
State of Rest.
We've got a Star Spangled Banner that got injured in Dubai with Matthew now. As I say, he doesn't get many runners, but I think when he does, he makes them count. He's a very good stallion. There's no doubt about it. And Epaulet as well. Well, I had a super horse here by Epaulet. That Epaulet particularly is a big, strong bugger, and there's plenty of him. And he's probably a little underrated as a sire. You know, I think he he falls away with all the big names around him, Epaulet, but he gets you winners for sure. And as I say, I bet a very, very good one.
I'm just seeing here. I've just spoken about all these staying pedigrees, Robbie, and I've got five sprinters on the screen. The Brazen Bow at the top, but down in the bottom right is the Grunt Colt, which is he's probably a miler plus, and he was a beauty, and you weren't stopping when you were putting your hand up on him.
No, well, he's we've got a bit of insider information there because we know a lot about the family, as the mum was a full sister to Fidelia, and she was an exceptional mare that should have probably had Group 1 data, but was just a bit unlucky in those events, but was definitely had the ability. And the mares had one to the track that the Hawks team train, and it's already winning. I think it's won the other day. It's won 2 or 4 or 2 or 5 already. It's quite smart. And actually, the sister trialled today very impressively, Typhoon Titmus. She's one of the young ones that Matt was talking about earlier that trialled really well today. So we knew how well she was going. So we went and we were chasing him in the paddock before he went to the sales. And Grunt was a really good miler, Flemington Group 1 miler. So that horse has got a bit of substance to probably even run up to 10 furlongs. So anyway, he's got everything he wants there. He's got the bone and the body, the girth and everything you look for. So he's a horse that should be a really good horse and be a really good 3-year-old Group 1 horse by the look of him. He's a spitting image of Dad, that's for sure.
And I've just launched a poll on the screen. That's just for just a stable survey. So I've been doing a little bit of stuff on social media at the moment. Just wanted to get people's feedback on what they'd like to see more of and that type of thing. So guys, if you fill that out along the way, and also I'll get to the questions and answers as well. So Mike, you're also, so the future and question time. So the reason I've got a picture there of Matt and Liam, one, I'm sure you'll like the photo, but also Liam's been doing a bit of cheering around the stables, and there's obviously the future. So you're down here in August, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, we're getting down there. We leave here the 12th. We get there the 13th.
And that's just a social visit or a bit of both?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to see the family. We're going to go away for a week, and then we'll probably do 2 weeks and change in Melbourne.
And Matt, you must be looking forward to that as well, being the end of I know that you've watched and been excited every time that your dad's won overseas, but also, there must be a little bit there that you miss not being there to see it, but you're here forging your own path.
Yeah, Corey, very, very excited to have a nice family holiday. My sister and her husband are coming over from America as well, so it's really having a nice family holiday week up in North Queensland, so that'll be really good. We'll leave Robbie and you in charge for a week in Melbourne, and hopefully you guys will keep the fires burning strong. But it'll be good to have my dad here. I'm sure he's going to come in a couple mornings and watch a few gallops. There's a few horses that he's got lots of shares in, so he's be keen to see them galloping in the morning, and hopefully we can set 1 or 2 up for him when he's here to go to the races and have a winner or 2 while he's here.
And Robbie, Mike's fast catching Shirani as your 2 biggest owners.
Yeah, well, the 2 biggest owners in the stable are definitely Shirani and Mike. So we've got to look after them and make sure that they're well looked after. So when Mike gets down, we've got to look after him and spoil him, I think, don't we, Matt?
Yeah, that's for sure. We've got to spoil him. He likes a beer and he likes a bit of food.
And Mike, I guess with the end of your season there's you've been travelling, I know, the last few days already, so there's no rest period as such. But I guess, how do you reflect on the season gone, and how do you see the next season going for yourself?
We've got one big meet left at the end of the season. It's a Gold Cup meet. The main race is a Gold Cup. It's a 2-mile handicap, and there would be, I think, 4 other Group 1s on the day. That, fun enough, isn't a Group 1. It used to be, but there's 4 Group 1s on the day as well. So it's a big meeting. but thereafter gets very quiet. You know, we don't have rain in Joburg for a good 4 to 5 months. So we'll wait before we bring the horses out in spring, and we have a bit of rain in Joburg. We'll bring them back from Durban. But it's been a very good season. I think we've had 4 or 5 Group 1 winners. Forget, it's been a lot of good quality winners, put it that way. And yeah, plenty to look forward to. Quite a nice bunch of young horses by the looks of things. And Sparkling Water stays in training another year. That helps. And she should even get better, given her pedigree. So, yeah, fair bit to look forward to. But, you know, one would expect a pretty quiet period now until the end of September, I guess.
And I guess, Matt, the longer-term aim is a 2-pronged attack when we go to Dubai. If we take ours over there, your dad takes his there, and we clean up everything.
That would be awesome, Corey. And maybe one day we'll get to Royal Ascot or somewhere like that.
Yeah. And I'll just go through some questions here now. So, Peter Stanley, this one's for yourself, Mike. The British Racing Authority just changed the jockey's use of the whip. Do you agree with the changes, and how do you believe these will be accepted in other countries?
Yeah, I definitely agree with changes needed. I'm not a big fan of horses getting whipped. I'm a fan of jockeys having whips for sure, and using them in a controlled manner. I think they need them sometimes, especially with you know, some really big, strong horses and what have you. But I can't watch a horse getting a hiding, you know, in the feet to get up. In fact, I think the more you hit them, the less they respond. I think once you hit a horse a couple of times or a few times and it hasn't responded, it's much like a kid. You give them 1 or 2 smacks, they know where they are. But when you're at it, there's a point where they, in fact, go backwards on you, I believe. The thing I cannot agree with and never will is punishing not only the owner, trainer, breeder, groom, and punter for a jockey's indiscretion by taking the race away. Because as I said to you, I don't believe it's an advantage to hit it more times. So I can't see how much of a big advantage you're getting. Punish the jockey for his indiscretion, because I can sympathize with jockeys in the heat of battle. Your head's down. Sometimes you don't have to get it to 400 or 200. I mean, I know they've got a pretty good idea, but they're banging away. Robbie will be able to tell you more. The adrenaline's pumping. Your head's down, and you're banging away, and you might transgress that rule. And for 5 other people to be punished, you're talking about black type, the mare owner, all this kind of thing. To have a race taken away for that indiscretion, for me, just doesn't make sense whatsoever. I agree with rule changes, definitely, with a whip, but I cannot agree that you can take a race away. That, for me, is illogical, because for one person's indiscretion, there's multiple people that are suffering. Stable staff, you know, that get the groom and the lads, they earn a few pound out of a winner. The mare owner, it's huge for them. Imagine taking a Group 1 away, because you could have won by 3 lengths, but you hit it 5 times or 8 times too many, and you take it away. I just don't get the logic in that. You know where that's going. I think you're catering too much to the greenies and the tree huggers. We definitely all want to see, don't want to see abuse. That's for sure. I'm the first one for it. And in fact, I was part of whipless races in South Africa and won the first one. So I'm definitely all for that, but I'm not all for punishing everybody concerned with the horse because the jockey makes a mistake. And they can make mistakes, believe you me. They're not deliberately doing it. I just don't see that. But it can happen. I don't know. Robbie would have a view on, you know, having been a jockey and then his brother being a great jockey, you know, heads down.
Yep. No, I agree with that 100%.
And you've got to count.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%, Mike. We've had the same argument when the topic comes up too, is that we in the heat of battle, jockeys aren't going to, be concentrating on counting 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So, and if they do make a mistake, then they should be accountable for their indiscretions, and nobody else should be accountable, as you pointed out, owners, trainers, stable staff, punters, whatever. So we think it should zero in on the jockey, and then that way, the show can go on. So 100%, all the trainers groups and associated groups in Australia concur with everything that you've said.
Yeah, and I think something
and
that you
Robbie,
touched
there's
on
another.
there.
If I could, sorry, Corey, if I could just bring in another aspect to this all. Let's say I'm a devious jockey, and I want to get the horse beat, and there's been a major punt on it or whatever. These things happen. You've got to think both sides of the coin and be open-minded about them and talk about these things. If I wanted to get a horse beat now, I don't have to pull it up anymore. I've just got to hit it 10 times more than it needs
disqualified,
to be. And I take the race away.
Yeah.
Disqualify.
Yeah.
So you're opening a whole can of worms there, in my opinion.
Correct.
And Matthew, we talked just before about an owner having to have patience. Now imagine if you're an owner for 2 years and you've paid $100,000 or more in training fees plus $1 million for the horse, and you've waited 2 years to get to the race, and it gets taken away because of something that's completely out of your control.
Well, there'd be legal, ramifications. There'd be people suing one another. There'd be all sorts of things happening. It'll be just, as Mike said,
it's going to get stupid.
It'll get stupid. Yeah, it'll open a massive can of worms. It'll just go stupid. Exactly.
And all right, Rod Hamilton has a question for you, Mike. He says he's really seriously wondering why your stable wears Richmond Tigers colours now that Matthew is a die-in-the-wall Collingwood supporter.
Okay, that's AFL. That's a little bit, I'm not too familiar with the AFL at all, but I'll make myself familiar with it, and then I'll be able to answer that.
Well, Richmond is yellow and black, and Collingwood's just black and white. So, Rod,
well, I suppose I'm Collingwood then.
Yeah, well, now you Richmond, yellow and black. Yeah, well, you Collingwood by association with me. Yeah,
that's my sponsor Betway.
Yeah, true.
So I'm a Betway man. Let's put it that way.
And the next one is your Derby winner by Rafif, which is Aragosta, I believe, who ran really well and ran in the Durban July. Where to for him now?
He runs in the Gold Cup on at the end of the month, which is the 2 mile handicap I spoke to you about. The weights are sort of condensed there, so it's not really in his favour, but we're going to have a crack anyway. He won the Derby at Turfentine over 1.5 miles. I know he's son of Rafif, but he's out of a Galileo mare. I think all the stamina is coming from there, which is what I really like about this Rafif, who's the son of Redute's Choice, as we spoke about earlier, is that he seems to throw to what you give him from the mare. I don't know how if Redute's was the same way in Australia, but which is quite impressive. That on the same day, funny enough, he had a Group 1 winner over 1.5 miles, i.e. the Derby, and he had a Group 1 winner in a weight for age 5 furlong race, both 3-year-olds. So that's quite impressive from any stallion, in my opinion. And he's out of a very, very fast mare, 5 furlong mare. So I don't know where this is all coming from, but it's pretty good genetics.
Reduce could do the same here. He could get a stayer here, and then he could get Lankan here. Could be the fastest sprinter here, so could get a Schnitzel and could get, those sort of horses, and he's an incredible stallion, Well,
that's why he's so great.
Yeah, exactly.
We're lucky to have a bit of that blood, actually. It's done us a lot of good, having that blood,
Yeah.
And just a completely off-topic question here with breeding, Mike, what would be with the protocols getting a horse here? If you were to try and breed, for example, a Rafif in South Africa to bring here, what would an owner do to make that happen? And what would the time
frames? Let's go best case scenario. Let's say in October we get the current ban lifted, because currently we've got to go via Mauritius. which means you've got to do 90 days in Mauritius. So you're going to do 21 in South Africa, 90 Mauritius, 6 months in Europe. Now, therein for me is, it just defies the logic. And that's the problem with these government officials that run around in white coats. They just don't really understand that you're dealing with high performance athletes here. And to put them on ice that long is just pretty unfair on them. But it's to do with, I think it's glanders or one of the diseases. I don't know. I think we lost our free status. So it's a technicality. But let's go best case scenario. And we ship directly into Europe, which will be 40 days pre-embarkation in South Africa, under which they can exercise every day. So let's say you bought a yearling by Rafif, you could have him broken and pre-trained during that 40 days while he's quarantining. He then goes to Europe, where he's currently got to spend 60 days residency. So that's no quarantine at all. So that horse will be in a stable, pre-training still. Yes, it might be slightly more expensive, but as I said to you, this is a long-term view one takes here. And in that 60 days, you'd have to do, I think you do 21 or 14 days quarantine before you go down to Melbourne or Sydney in the quarantine down there. So you can use that period to pre-train the horse, because you're not coming here to buy the Blue Diamond or Slipper winner. You're coming here for a Guineas Plus type individual. So while it's going to be a long road, but again, you're getting the value of the rand in that you're buying for $100,000. You can go to the sales and take your pick of the best filly out of a Group 1 mare, help yourself for $100,000. Probably cost you another $50,000 or $60,000 to get it back home to Australia. So for $160,000 to say $200,000, worst case scenario, you can buy at an absolute highest level in South Africa, whereas you averaging $350,000 there. So there's value to be had, but you're going to have the patience to pre-train your horse on the road, let's put it that way, as opposed to out at one of your farms over there or whatever it is. So the horse gets to Melbourne ready to roll.
Yeah. And Matt, something else for yourself, we were speaking about the cost of pre-training and things like that, because our fees here are a lot higher in Australia and in South Africa and other jurisdictions. It actually doesn't cost as much because of the exchange rate from the Australian dollar to have them trained and pre-trained on their way here, other than obviously the flight here costing a lot of money.
Yes and no, Corey. It's obviously the Australian dollar is very strong, and compared to Australian training rates, it's probably cheaper, but it's more expensive here for a reason, in that you're racing in the best industry in the world, and you're racing for the best stake money in the most competitive environment. So it's still going to be costly because you're paying for the time that the horse spends on the road. But once you get the horse into the country, you'll see the value, because you'll have a top quality young horse with a lot of potential.
Yeah. And Robbie, I guess we've got a lot of horses coming into the stable now that have made their way from overseas. How do you find that they adapt? You've had horses from the UK before. Are you finding that it's pretty much the same thing once they get here?
They're all different, but the ones that have joined the yard have all adapted really well. They've all settled in really well, and they don't always. Sometimes they take a little bit longer. Their coats aren't always in sync with our climate, but the guys that have come into the yard have all settled in really well, and they've all adapted, and they're all coming along beautifully. Couldn't be happier. Yeah.
And Mike, I've got a question here from Peter Lambton. He said, thoughts on training mares and fillies from the paddock versus the stalls? Should Australia think about that?
Well, I love it. I mean, the filly that won the July Sparkling Water doesn't live in a stall. She lives outdoors in a paddock. She goes and works in the morning, comes back, gets groomed over and turned out 24/7, except if it rains. So, yeah, I love that, actually, to be honest with you. I really wish I could do that with all my horses. I'd love to train them from a paddock.
Yeah. And I guess, Matt, we do have that option now that we never had previously with the farm at Cloverdale.
Yeah, of course, it's only 20 minutes down the road. We've got a treadmill out there now. So we can, have them on the treadmill during the week and bring them in for their important gallops, and it can be used with great success.
Yeah, so that's something that's sort of kicking off now, which is great. Yeah. Will Setterino says, have you thought, this looks like it's for you, Matt, have you thought about adding the pink shorts to the Griffiths de Kock uniform?
You've seen me go around the sales with the pink shorts, and I'm trying to create a fashion trend, but it doesn't seem to be catching on. And hopefully, I can have a bit of support from Will. Maybe he can buy a pair, and we can start a trend.
Joey Ramsden's got a few pairs of pink shorts, hasn't
he? He does too.
And he loves wearing them. He's English.
I wouldn't be following Joey's fashion. All right, Nico K. Mike says, great to see the de Kock name grow across the globe. There's no doubt from our end in South Africa that Matthew will grow in stature there as time goes on. From a commentator's perspective here in South Africa, I wish Mike all the best in the next season.
That's my man, Nico, the good man.
Yeah. So he's online, obviously. So viewers from everywhere. And Robbie, did you have any questions while we have Mike on board? I think that's it from our audience.
No, all good. What's the next winner, Mike?
Well, hopefully the Gold Cup.
There you go.
And the Champions Cup on the day. So we'll see.
Beautiful. Well, best of luck, and I'll see you in August.
Shortly, yeah. Thank you.
And
excellent.
Matt,
look forward to that.
Any other questions you think the viewers might like?
You caught me a bit off guard, Corey. Let's say, what race would you like to win as an owner, Dad? Now that you're an owner in Australia, what race would you like to win in Australia as an owner? That's all pressure on me and Robbie, but
yeah, good on you, Matt.
Just so we know.
Right now, maiden plate, Matthew. That'll do.
Maiden plate.
Yeah. Obviously, I loved when we were there that Melbourne Cup week. Wow, that was really special. So obviously the Melbourne Cup. Every mug says that. But I enjoy your classic racing there too. I've raced at Guinea's Day, there, Derby Days. Anything that's I like those type of horses. Quite frankly, I prefer them to sprinters. But if a nice sprinter comes my way, I'm not going to turn it away. But that's to win anything on those big meetings, I think would be amazing for us.
Yeah, and speaking of the Spring Carnival approaching, Robbie, and sprinters, how awesome! What's the plans for him?
Matt and I got to finalise plans because he's not the soundest of horses. So normally we have him ready for the final week. So we got to bring him up a little bit earlier, and so the Moir Stakes could be a possibility. Or, if we don't want to do that, we could look at the Caulfield Sprint, the Group 2, a week later. So we're just working out whether we look at the Group 1s, the Darley, or whether we sidestep the big guns like Nature Strip and them. So we've got sort of plan A and plan B, depending on taking on the big guns or whether we look at the second tier. And so we're going to sort of fine tune that as we get closer to those big events and what everyone else is doing. But he's in good order. He's just doing some light work in the stable at the moment, and we're happy with him. And he's coming off good form. So to be finalised, Corey.
Yep. And Matt, any big plans for Yaki Ishii?
Oh, like my dad says, maiden plate would be a good start. But we'll just take it as it comes at this stage, Corey. He's doing very well in training, and he's exciting us in the mornings. But we'd like to just get that first win under the belt, and then hopefully with the timing that he's going to be ready springtime, and then hopefully things work out and we can identify some nice races for him.
Yep. I've got some questions here, Mike, which were emailed to me, which I forgot to ask. So Terry Feduni, who's one of our owners, asked, which sire is Mike's favourite as a possible stallion producing sire? So which one do you buy, hoping that it might make a stallion for you?
Well, Vercingetorix and Rafif in South Africa at the moment. Those are the two. Silvano is a little bit. I think he's had his last crop. Who's the sire of Vercingetorix? If you're asking me, obviously it's about South Africa.
Either, I think it was
Australia.
Open-ended, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are the two in South Africa. As far as Australia goes, I don't know. It's, the obvious are the Schnitzels and the Zoo Stars, etc. I don't know much more further than that. So, I'll be just making a fool of myself to try and answer that for you there. But
yeah.
In South Africa, those are the two super sires at the moment. Give Me the Green Light, who, funny enough, is a son of More Than Ready, who was bought in Australia as well. And he's also been champion last year. So there's a lot of that sort of influence here. But the young pretender right now is a horse called Vercingetorix that I trained. And he's a son of Silvano, who may have raced in the Cox Plate. I think he's a German.
He did.
A German horse, a son of Lomatas. I think it is very tough horse.
We actually had a son.
I mean, as I said, there's a lot of, cross-pollination in our bloodlines, which would interest your owners there at a fraction of what they're paying in Australia.
Yeah, we actually had a son of Give Me the Green Light come down and went to stud with Yulong Prince.
Yeah, Yulong Prince. I had him in Dubai. Yeah.
And then his other question was, does Mike give pedigree page more importance than physical type? What ratio of importance do you put on it? Obviously, when you're in Australia, you were looking mainly at type. But in general?
Both. It's a very good question there, because I am very much a pedigree man as well. And I always believe blood will out at some stage. But again, if you buy the Pope out of the Queen and you don't look like a racehorse, I wouldn't even be interested. I would overlook a lot. I like to know about the families, because there's certain faults. You take a horse like Vercingetorix, who was never a correct horse at all. So would be that he does throw you horses with faults. So to go to the sales and critique him and say, oh, this has got a K, or it's offset, or it's splayed, or whatever, that's what he looked like. So the knowledge of pedigree will help you overlook certain faults that others may, sort of not go for the horse because of that fault and not knowing the bloodline. So they would criticize the horse and knock him off a list, whereas you'd be inclined to forgive something if you know more about that pedigree. I think it's a good balance of both, but still, I think a horse has to look like an athlete. I don't care how well bred he is. And often, what you'll see on sales, we see it here very often, is you can get a really striking individual, beautiful, athletic horse. Everyone loves him. Mug's horse, but he's got no pedigree whatsoever. They always sell for more than they're worth. And very, very, very few times do they actually turn out to be the real deal. So, yeah, it's a good balance of both, but I am a pedigree man, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I mean, Robbie, we got to spend time with Mike at the sales in Melbourne and Sydney, and something that I noticed myself was when we were looking at a horse, we might have an opinion, but then Mike would have an opinion on how that stallion looked. So I know More Than Ready, for example, he was a big rap for and sort of knew that bloodline really well. And then it was just really intriguing to have him here for the sales.
Absolutely. I think when you have the amount of knowledge that Mike's had in the years in the industry of knowledge of stallions and how they look and how their progeny look and how they race, so I think that amount of knowledge is incredibly valuable to have, because then you can draw upon it when you look at their progeny and see how they grow out, because the last thing you want to do is buy something that doesn't look anything like the pedigree, especially when you're looking at first season sires and so on. You need to draw upon something. So you want to see anything come through that might give you hope that that they're going to run up to the genetic power that you're paying for. So when you can draw upon experiences of genetics that you've seen in the past that have worked, and Mike's got all that from, you know, from years of following genetics all the way through. So I think that that's a massive plus when you're going around the sale complex.
Yeah.
Stallion stats are also important. I found as well, Corey. You know, on established stallions, obviously with first season size, it's impossible. But once stallions have had a few crops at stud, you already know where they're going, and they very rarely defy their stats. You know, and sometimes you've got to be brutal. I mean, one of the guys I walk around sales with, John Malherbe, he's pretty brutal when it comes to stats, and I like that balance as well. You know, but it's something you can't ignore.
Yeah, and you did ask a lot of times, Corey, check what are the stats on this guy, and then scratch straight off the list if the stats were poor, which is, you know,
Corey, with all the mares too, you know, when we're walking around, you know, like all the one thing, good thing about all of these crops, every mare and every female line has a great story, because, you know, everything that we liked on type, you know, when there was Matt, Mike, myself and you, Peter Ford, and all of us walking around, any horse that we purchased had a good female stat as well, because anything that looked good, unless the female line was producing, we wouldn't go near it in the auction house to bid on, you know. And I think that's a very important stat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Matt, I guess just to finish off, how do you find, like, you've spent, you know, your whole life looking at horses with your dad, so probably not as exciting to walk around the sales complex with your dad as it was for us this year. But how do you find, I guess, the differences of looking at horses, how your dad looks at them comparatively to the good judges you've looked at horses with here in your time in Australia? Or do you feel like every horse person has their own unique way, and it just, you find your own?
Well, everyone has their own opinion, Corey, and I think everyone's opinion is justified, and you should never knock someone's opinion because they could be right. You know, if they like something in a horse that you don't like, you know, as long as they've got something to back it up, I think they're entitled to their opinion. But you know, I've obviously learned from my dad most of my career in selecting horses, and I've learned from my dad in training and feeding and etc. and handling horses and staff and clients. But I always felt that my dad's probably his biggest strength was his eye for a horse. He always managed to select a good horse and put a good horse in the yard. And that's where it starts. If you select bad horses, doesn't matter how good a trainer you are, you can be Aidan O'Brien, Bart Cummings, they're not going to make the slow ones fast. So you got to be able to identify good athletes. And I always felt that my dad that was his biggest, or is his biggest asset. And it's still exciting, as exciting as it is for you guys to work with him for the first time. It was still great for me to have him over here again and just put things into perspective once again, and you know, brush up on any errors I've been making, etc. Because his knowledge is always there, and it's free for our team to utilize.
Yeah. All right. Well, we might wrap up there. It's been a good listen, like always, Mike. So I appreciate that. What time is it there? 11:30 in the morning or something?
12:15, yeah. So what are you, 8:15?
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us from over there, and we appreciate you giving up the time, and I'm sure that everyone watching will find that just as intriguing as we have. So thanks very much.
Silvano ran 4th in the Cox Plate.
Yeah, I remember he raced until he was 7.
Yeah, he ran 4th to Northerly in the Cox Plate 2001.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, super horse.
Perfect, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Robbie.
Good on you, Corey. Thanks, Mike. See you in August.
Cheers, Corey.
See you, Matt.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Corey.